Now to Ukraine, and at least 16 people have been killed in the heaviest Russian attacks on the country so far this year. Drones and missiles struck the capital Kyiv and other cities. Ukraine's military says it hit back with strikes on oil depots in Russian-occupied Crimea and a port in southern Russia.
The Russian bombardment came in waves overnight. Kyiv once again coming under sustained attack. The capital's air defences shot down some of the incoming Russian missiles, but many others got through. This couple were fortunate to escape unscathed.
We hid when the first attack happened. My girlfriend said, "Let's get up," and I said, "No, let's wait." Then the second attack happened, and everything flew around. It was terrible. Thank God we didn't get up.
Authorities later said follow-up Russian attacks targeted emergency crews who were helping the wounded. At least 8 people were killed in the southern port of Odesa.
The enemy carried out a massive assault on Odesa. As a result of the strike, residential, civilian and port infrastructure were damaged. Firefighters extinguished blazes in several locations.
There were more dead and wounded in the southeastern city of Dnipro, where housing and public facilities were struck.
The building that suffered the most damage is an architectural heritage site. It used to house the cultural center of the Russian Orthodox Church, a library, and it hosted lectures on friendship between the two countries.
I heard a cracking sound, extremely loud, and it went on for a long time. Then there was another one. I feel shock, fear, and despair, nothing else. And I'm condemning a so-called brotherly nation.
Ukraine has also hit back with a drone strike on the Russian Black Sea port of Tuapse, where an oil tanker was hit and 2 people were killed. President Volodymyr Zelensky and the Ukrainian people were later honored in the Netherlands for their courage throughout the 4-year war. Zelensky said Russia must not go unpunished.
Let's get more on this now from DW's Nick Connolly in Kyiv. Nick, tell us more about the overnight attacks on Ukraine.
This all happened very, very fast. Normally there is a bit of a lag between the air alert going off and the big bangs or the intercepted missiles being launched to stop ballistic missiles. But here it was a question of a few minutes between the air alert going off about 2:30 in the morning and the first big bangs here in Kyiv, where I am right now. And currently there is talk of 4 casualties and up to 60 wounded, including a child that was killed. In other cities, Odessa, even more fatalities and more people dead in the southeast, in Dnipro and in Zaporizhia region. So this was basically the whole country. And I think it really shows that right now Russia is having to basically do big attacks and try and overwhelm Ukraine's air defenses in one big go, rather than doing the kind of piecemeal attacks we might have seen earlier in the war, when Russian missiles were able to get past air defenses better, and so they were able to do a couple of ballistic missiles at a time. This was hundreds of drones, of which over 90% were intercepted, according to the official figures, and significant numbers of ballistic missiles across the country. And that just then ends up being a situation in which some of these missiles get through, or at least some of the debris of intercepted missiles also falls to the earth, doing significant damage to property but also to human lives.
How well, Nick, is Ukraine still able to intercept Russian missiles? Because Volodymyr Zelensky recently told the German broadcaster ZDF that the supply of crucial U.S.-built Patriot interceptor missiles couldn't get any worse.
Well, exactly. That was something that really got people here pretty worried. It did seem here in Kyiv, at least last night, that a lot of things were being sent out to intercept the missiles coming in. Whether or not that was Patriot, it's difficult to tell. But I think there is always a question of lag, right, between these supplies arriving and then them actually being used on the battlefield, as it were. I think the fact that in recent weeks we've had Western governments talking about sending 3, 5 interceptor missiles, maybe 30 at best, really tells you quite how huge the pressure is right now to get these missiles. to intercept one ballistic missile reliably, you would want to have, if you're lucky, 2 or 3 interceptor missiles, or at least 1. So even at best, if Ukraine's got a couple of dozen of these missiles additionally in the last couple of weeks, that is basically a few nights of Russian attacks at best. And right now, with the situation in the Middle East, where you have more of these interceptor missiles used in a couple of days than the United States produces in a year, this situation is only set to get worse. So it really is a real fear here right now that Ukraine, even if it has the money to buy these very expensive interceptors, might not get them because other countries will be further up the queue.
Yesterday, the alliance of countries backing Ukraine came together, as you know, pledging more military support. How significant, Nick, are the commitments being made by the Ukraine Defense Contact Group?
Well, certainly the numbers being talked of are significant, right? There's that 60 billion we heard being talked of. Some of that will probably be from the European Union loan that is now finally going to come now that that Hungarian veto is gone. That's believed to be 30 billion per year this year and next for defense, and then more for civilian funding. So that already gives you half of that. But generally, it is a question of money, producing stuff here in the country, and then hoping that the Trump administration allows Ukraine to get some of the Western American-built technology before its allies in the Middle East and elsewhere in Asia.
Nick, thank you very much. That was DW's Nick Connolly in Kyiv.
Well, joining me now is Lucian Kim. He's a senior Ukraine analyst at the International Crisis Group. Lucian is also the author of Putin's Revenge, Why Russia Invaded Ukraine. And he joins me tonight from Washington, D.C. It's good to see you. We just reported on those overnight attacks on Ukraine. How well is Ukraine still able to intercept Russian missiles? I mean, we heard Volodymyr Zelensky recently tell German television that the supply of crucial U.S.-built Patriot interceptor missiles, and I'm quoting here, he said it could not get any worse.
Well, the Ukrainians are saying that they're still managing to shoot down a majority of the missiles coming in. But you're right, supplies are getting tight, and Zelensky has now instructed his generals to look everywhere where they can and really make every connection in Europe that they have to find those missiles. I think it's important to understand that we are talking about interceptor missiles that fit the Patriot, American-made Patriot anti-missile system. And that's the one that the Ukrainians stand by. And there's globally a shortage of these missiles because of the war in Iran. And Europeans have seen their stocks falling as well. So it's really a question where they can still find supplies to send the Ukrainians.
Yesterday, we saw the alliance of countries that are backing Ukraine come together, pledging more military support. How significant are the commitments being made by the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, as it's known? I mean, is it as important as ever for the military of Ukraine?
Well, in some ways, they are even more important than earlier. I think it's also important to remember that the United States right now is only providing weapons in that it will sell weapons to NATO allies that will then deliver those weapons to Ukraine. But there are no more. The United States, as a donor of weaponry, has since the beginning of the Trump administration the United States has completely erased itself from that, withdrawn itself from that equation. So really, every agreement that Ukraine can now make with Europeans gains that much more in importance. I think there's an interesting development. Ukraine has long been seen as a country that's in dire need of weaponry and often coming to countries asking for more help. And I think what we're seeing now, and is especially present now since the beginning of the Iran war, is that Ukraine is trying to present itself also as an exporter of security, an exporter of weapons, not just a country that is asking. And we saw that in Zelensky's visit to the Middle East recently, and his recent tour now in Europe. He really wants to demonstrate that Ukraine has the know-how and expertise unique to these new technologies.
Yeah, that's a very good point. It was reported on a lot this week about this almost reversal of roles that we're seeing right now for Zelensky and what he's talking talking about when he visits allies of Ukraine. Much of the world's attention right now is focused, of course, on the conflict in the Middle East. What impact is that having on the war between Russia and Ukraine?
Well, it's having a huge impact. In practical terms, as we just talked about, there are not enough of these Patriot interceptor missiles to go around. So that is a very practical effect. But more broadly speaking, the Ukraine war is sort of drifting back into the background as the Iran war moves front and center. And I think this has been always a problem for Ukraine in keeping its conflict top of mind, at least for European allies. Obviously, since the Trump administration came into office, keeping the Americans involved has been much more difficult. But even in this sense, Zelensky was very proactive and came out offering his help to the United States when the war started. The reaction, of course, by Donald Trump was not so receptive.
Lucy, I want to remind our viewers too, you are plugged in to the events taking place in Ukraine and Russia, probably as much as anyone, more than almost anyone. Can you give us your assessment of where the war is right now? I mean, when it started, almost 5 years ago, I mean, that was a long time ago. A lot has happened. Where do things stand right now?
Well, right now, when people ask me this question, I often compare it to the question about a glass half empty or a glass half full. It depends on who you talk to, who you ask. But I think we are looking at this kind of glass. On one hand, the Ukrainians are certainly trying to portray it as that they are fighting back, and and recently they have even had some success in pushing the Russians back in southeastern Ukraine. But if you look at it from the other side, the Russians are unrelenting in their attacks. Of course, the overnight attack is just another example of what the firepower and the lengths that Russia is ready to go to prosecute this war. So it is, in that sense, we are not expecting any breakthroughs on the battlefield because as people now begin to understand, it's very hard to mass enough troops to have a breakthrough somewhere on the front line because of the drones. So what we're looking at is really grinding fighting. And if you're asking if there's going to be a peaceful resolution, it's hard to see that right at this moment. Right now, it's springtime. The Ukrainians are expecting a new Russian offensive. I mean, the Russian offensive is already sort of getting started. And in the warmer months, certainly the Russians will try to create new facts on the ground to even improve their negotiating position better. And another factor, also overshadowed, of course, by the Iran war, is that Trump's attempts at diplomacy have really hit a roadblock. They hit a roadblock even before the fighting in Iran started. Ukraine is unwilling to give up territory in the Donetsk region, and Russia is unwilling to stop fighting and agree to a ceasefire. So you have both sides at a loggerhead, and neither is able to reach an agreement, and the U.S. is unable to break it.
Lucian, good to see you. Good to get your insights. Helps to put things in perspective, too, and in context. Thank you.
Good to see you. Bye-bye.